together pretty much a structured meetup process. So we're looking forward for you guys to get involved with some of those things. And some of the other things, really great news to let you guys know, Microsoft and J&J and SONSIEL have extended their partnership for another 3 years for biannual hackathons. That was a major accomplishment for the organizations. So you guys know that they're going to continue run. We're expanding our partnership with Drexel and moving forward for further educational opportunities. So if you guys had a good time at that, we're going to keep going with that. And some other exciting developments that we can't quite announce yet, but there's going to be many opportunities for you guys to engage. And one of the things that we want to make sure that you guys are aware of as well is that we really want to publish you. If you guys also haven't heard, SONSIEL for the first time has actually just had 2 articles accepted in major nursing journals around the impact of nurse hackathons and the impact of nurses. And our further going hackathons, we're really going to start collecting data analytics to actually trend longitudinal trends on that. So if anybody's interested in research and wants to gather to one of those committees, they can. Anybody who wants to write and do blogs, we'd like to do those things. I think most of you guys maybe, or we did send out the Outcomes Rocket podcast, who Hilario was just my second guest on. They asked me to become the host for Outcomes Rocket Nursing, which means I am now able to interview any nurse in the United States and world who wants to come in and talk to me. They have a following over 50,000 listeners, and I would love you guys to be on it. So I'm going to make that information is put out there for you guys so you can book a time if you're interested in going on those ones. So those are some of the things we have coming up in the fall. Anything that I forgot, Faith? No, we have nothing. Nancy, anything else that we have coming?
No, nothing. Well, nothing that we can announce yet. So we have other stuff coming down the pike, but we just can't announce. We can't announce everything.
Well, there's a lot coming.
There's a lot coming. We're working on a lot. Believe me, we're working on a lot.
Trying to redefine what nursing looks like to the world and get you guys some of those. Also, that certificate, hoping to get you guys a badge for those who went to the Drexel certificate program, to be putting it up on LinkedIn. Also, for hackathons, we're actually moving forward with the badge, possible things to put on your resume as well. So stay excited about those things. But you guys, without further ado, I want to introduce you guys to Hilario Castillo, who's going to be our speaker tonight, who's going to talk to us for the next 20 minutes about his story. But let me tell you a little bit about Hilario. Hilario is a first-generation immigrant to the United States that immigrated from the Dominican Republic when he was just a teenager. And Hilario, I'm going to share a little bit about your story because I love this part of the story. Was Hilario, after graduating high school, was driving trucks, and he got in a major accident that almost cost him his life. And his mother stopped and looked at him and said, "There's so much more you can be doing with your intelligence." And he had been a pretty good baseball player, so his cousin encouraged him to go and try to play baseball in college. He got to college and he realized of all of his courses, the course that stuck the most with him is A&P. And I don't know about you guys, but that was my least favorite course, really. But he realized at that moment that he wanted to become a nurse. And his story has unfolded. Hilario lives in the South Bronx, as they say. He is an RN entrepreneur with a background in healthcare. He utilized his acute care clinical expertise to launch Innovative Neurons LLC, a nurse-founded startup that aims to develop a series of innovative medical device technologies with the goal of reducing chronic health conditions, healthcare costs, developing safer technologies that will benefit clinicians and enhance the patient experience. Innovative Neurons' first product is his nurse-invented breakthrough patented safety syringe that has a unique time savings and safety features currently unavailable in the syringes market, at the aim of decreasing needle sticks. And I know you guys know this as much as I am. This is one of those things that we all fear as nurses. In his view, and in what he's developing, the goal of this syringe will help decrease healthcare costs, needle stick injuries, and help nurses save valuable time during routine injection procedures across all healthcare settings. So, Hilario, thank you for being here with us. We're going to turn the stage over.
Sure. Well, thank you for that amazing introduction, Rebecca. It's been a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here with the rest of you guys, amazing nurses and entrepreneurs, and to have the opportunity to be in this amazing platform and part of this incredible community of SONSIEL and other nurse entrepreneurs. So I think you pretty much said the introduction there for me. So my name is Hilario Castillo. I've been a registered nurse for over 10 years, mostly consistent of ER and ICU experience. And so, as Rebecca mentioned, I'm the founder of Innovative Neurons. We are a medical device company that started working on bringing to the market this innovative safety syringe that has unique time and features, safety features. I came up with this idea, like many of us nurses, in the clinical setting. I was lucky enough to have mentors that I met, believe it or not, as patients of mine, that when I saw witness a colleague of mine sustain an accidental needle stick while trying to give an injection to an agitated patient in the ER, just had one of those light bulb moments that we always have at the bedside. And I was lucky enough to have great mentors that said, hey, you know, I can teach you the ropes, or more or less be able to provide, you know, some resources as to a strategy to move forward from an idea. And, you know, years later, I was able to get a patent and this technology work in prototype and getting, you know, great feedback and momentum, and looking forward to bringing this to the market to help, you know, clinicians and healthcare as a whole, as far as reducing accidental needle sticks and saving time in the process with a different kind of technology. I would love to answer any questions anyone may have. Not sure the.
Let me ask you some questions, Hilario, because I know it's really hard to do these things, and I want you guys to jump in. So Hilario, tell us about so you had this breakthrough moment. You decided, hey, I want to develop this syringe. What was your first step? What did you do? Take us back in that moment of time, because I think we've all been in that moment where something happens and we know that ideas are flighting. So tell us that next step.
Sure. So.
Oh, and then also, Alice put in a really good question. Holly did as well, and said, hey, can you also tell us how you how your device works? So start at like this light bulb moment,
Sure.
when your first few steps, and how does your device work? Yep, and then we'll take
questions. Sure,
absolutely.
So for those of us that work in the acute care setting, whether it's ER, ICU, even med-surg, etc., we know that we have to switch needles to give medications. We usually withdraw with an 18 gauge needle and inject with a 21, 23 gauge needle. So that's exactly what was happening to my colleague. He was switching, and as he was switching, he pricked himself. This happens frequently. So right there, I just saw a different way that we syringe. So most of us, I don't come from a business background in nursing. So I was just, you know, had a really, what I felt was a good idea. And I discussed it with other colleagues of mine and other nurses, and they felt that it was a great idea. And as I mentioned earlier, I was lucky enough to meet some patients
Hilario, real
that
quick,
became
before we jump
mentors.
there, Hilario, step back, show us the device and show us how it's different. Like, what does it do differently in this first one? So thank you.
Sure.
And then we're going to dive into
Absolutely.
how you got your mentor. Yep.
Absolutely. So usually, as we know, we have to attach an 18 gauge needle, right, to withdraw a medication, right? So we withdraw the medication. We have to, you usually apply the safety feature, right? This one doesn't have one. And then we have to manually remove it. And then we have to waste time unpacking a 21 or 23 gauge needle to give the IM injection, which we are familiar with when they're viscous or antibiotics that we mix with different kinds of medications. So we'll give the injection, and then we have to, you know, apply the safety feature and remove it. All that process takes about between 2 and 3 minutes. And as you can imagine, in the ER, or in the acute care setting, for us nurses, that's very important to reduce time. And all those steps contribute to accidental needle stick, which is a close to $1 billion problem in healthcare globally, almost 1 in the United States alone every year. So the technology I invented is a technology or syringe that, instead of having to manually switch needles and waste time and put yourself at risk of pricking yourself and wasting time trying to look for needles, you simply retract, right? You look for the 18 gauge needle, right? You withdraw the medication for the 18 gauge. And once you're ready to switch, instead of manually switching, you simply go back like this and you rotate and you look for the 21 gauge and you give the injection, and then it retracts back automatically. So it saves, you know, usually takes about 20 seconds for the whole process of this technology. And this is an early prototype. And it, you know, it's about, as you can see, about 4 or 5 steps compared to about 15. So we're talking about significant time savings and reduction in the steps that contribute to accidental needle sticks. So that's the technology. And, you know, we believe so far we've received, you know, 100% endorsement and validation from other clinicians, other nurses, NPs, doctors, et cetera, that, you know, their first question is, where is this? How come we don't have it in the market yet? So we believe this is going to really finally help resolve the problem with needle stick, but at the same time, be the first technology to introduce a new process in the way we administer medications in the acute care settings, whether it's psychiatric, EMS, OR, OB, anywhere that we have to switch needles. So the first question, Rebecca, I'm so sorry because I got so
Not at all.
into,
It's actually Carrie.
technology.
Carrie, go ahead and come off of mute real quick and ask your question because you asked a really good question on this that you go ahead, Carrie.
Okay, so Hilario, I'm in a process right now where I'm taking a step back, and I've got a product for patient care, and through SONSIEL, I've found just this wonderful person who's willing to be my mentor. But I guess my question is, so how did you find your mentor? And then where are you with your process? Are you in the process of commercializing it? Are you licensing it to a company? Are you doing your own startup and getting traction that way? I guess I'm really curious as to that process, where you are, and how you did it, because I'm right there in that same spot.
Hey, Carrie, thank you for your question. It's a pleasure to meet you. I would love to tell you a bit more about the process, my process. So at the beginning, as I was mentioning, I was lucky enough that some patients that I met at the bedside had a significant and really good business background, and they decided to just mentor me in the basic business processes, how to develop a business plan, a marketing plan, and get incorporated, whether it's LLC or different kind of incorporation process. However, eventually, once I had to start focusing on product development and intellectual property, I started looking for resources out there, different kinds of platforms that at that time bootstrapping it, right? Like most nurses that don't have funding at the time, self-funding the process to get the intellectual property. Started networking, was lucky enough to have friends here in New York City that are involved with the tech entrepreneurship arena. So I was going to many hardware meetups and hackathons and networking with engineers. And I just started networking, putting myself out there as a nurse entrepreneur, and eventually ended up meeting engineers and folks that are patent attorneys that would help me to get the intellectual property and get the prototype to the point that we got it. So that was my process, which took some time because I wish at that time I had met some of you guys, Rebecca, and an organization like this that can really fast track all that time into mentors and advisors within the nursing community that can really help tell you, hey, you have this great idea, this is the steps you should follow. So it has made a huge difference to connect. It almost, after the SONSIEL event in 2019, I felt like it just really pushed forward everything much farther, because I started meeting new folks, other nurses like yourself that are at different stages, that was able to connect me with other folks that are farther along, and we're getting great traction. So where we are right now, we have we're at the prototype stage, and we're trying to raise funding to get us to the next milestone, which is having a finalized prototype that we can test and do pilot trials, so we can validate our data and our assumptions, and then be able to achieve the next milestone, which would be applying for regulatory clearance, and then exploring the different pathways to market, whether it's a licensing agreement or manufacturing as well. I hope I was able to answer your question a bit.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I'm looking forward to hearing how your journey goes. So thank you for sharing your story.
Sure, it's my pleasure, Carrie. And good luck with yours. And I would love to connect,
Okay.
answer any questions.
I might be reaching out to you, Hilario. So thank you for that offer.
Sure, anytime. I'm always on LinkedIn, so I can find me there.
So actually, Hilario, I'm going to take a question from the chat. This is Faith. I'm the chief cook and bottle washer at SONSIEL. So did you?
Hi, Faith.
Hi. Did your hospital support you in this effort at all?
No, this was done in an independent manner, and that I think that's one of the conversations certainly that I would imagine would be here for hours. That sometimes I guess we wish there were more hospital systems that would provide, that kind of support for nurse entrepreneur. I know there's different university hospitals out there that do provide that support, but when I came up with the concept, took an independent path pretty much. Was looking for different resources as regards to possible strategic alliances with some hospitals at that time, but I felt that, or the advisors and the mentors, that we could manner. Certainly, that's a viable option as well. If someone can, I would say, develop a strategic alliance with a hospital system to develop the product.
Right. Fallon, you had a question for Hilario?
Yes, I do. Hi, Hilario. Great story. It definitely resonated with me because I actually had a needle stick injury recently. I did actually a whole a video on this on my YouTube page. I don't know if anybody wants to check it out. It's called Latina Nurse Wellness. And I talked about needle stick prevention or needle stick intervention. Like for me, it's a question and a comment. So for me, I kind of beat myself up for the needle stick injury, and I love your approach. You're like, look, I can make it better. Let's find a solution, because I was actually giving IM injections the vaccines. So it was so repetitive. It was like a repetitive just action, and so I think in that process, one moment I just looked away and I got a needle stick injury, but versus trying to like find a solution, I was like beating myself up. And so that's something that I talk about in my on my wellness page. But I just love how you took the initiative and you're like, okay, let's find a solution. This is not going to work, because it's true that blunt needle, it's a process. It takes several minutes, and it's like, why am I doing this? There has to be something smarter. So I guess my question to you is, how do we get this in our hospital? What's the next step? Because we need access to it, especially if we're out here giving vaccines and things like that. You know what I'm saying? And the government gives us like these cheap little needles with very flimsy safety devices. And that was something that I addressed in my video. I was like, versus beating yourself up that it's the nurse, mistake, it's really the the OSHA website says it's most likely needle stick, injuries come from malfunctions with the device. If this is the most common reason, like, why aren't we coming up with more devices? And so, yeah, I just love your approach. I can appreciate it. Sounds amazing. And how do we get it in my hospital?
Hey, Fallon, thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm so glad that everything worked out and it's okay after the needle sticks. I'm sorry you had to experience that. I know it can be a couple of months of anxiety, because I think we all go through that, right? The psychological component, which I think there's no cost that can be attributed to that psychological, stressor during those months, wondering what happened. So, I would say just support from the nursing industry, from nurses. I say when nurses speak, the world listens. We've seen that, especially the pandemic, where I think most of the communities and society started really learning about what we do more than ever, and how we're frontline workers, and the significance of nursing to healthcare. So I think organizations like SONSIEL have been an incredible support, and other organizations that have been in the process of giving exposure to the technology, and like nurses like yourself out there just networking. And sometimes one might hear your story, it might resonate to an experience, and that starts a conversation and sharing the video or the technology, and eventually it just becomes, I guess, just that awareness grows, right? And it brings so much support that eventually it almost, I guess, it starts that dialogue with companies to say, hey, we're interested in taking a look at that technology, invented by a nurse that has the support of the nursing industry and nurses from around the country that apparently see an unmet need with this technology. So that's one way that I think would be very helpful. But I think we're getting close to getting to where a milestone where we would have the data published, and it would be appreciated by different medical device companies, pharmaceutical companies, that we can start having those conversations to bring this to the market. Very soon.
Yes, I sounds like it's so needed, like just from my own experience, like, and then of course, how you were talking about in your experience as well, like it's definitely something that's needed. So if it's going to be supported by, nurses, and you're starting here, like hopefully it'll put some fire under all of it and get it happening soon. I appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you for your comment, and I will definitely make sure to check out your blog and connect as well, and all the support. Appreciate it.
Exactly. Like your product is well overdue. I mean, the last time I was in the operating room, they just finally got to, putting blade covers, because surgeons and fellows and everybody are in there, the operating room. And it was just like, finally, like, I can put on a blade in seconds. You know what I mean? Like, and then, the second the attending makes the cut, they just throw, right. So now, right when I was transitioning out of the operating room, all the blades have retractable. The second that they were done, they had to flip back up, so none of us would get cut, because it's, I mean, this is very important when we're moving very fast. So this is like, I can't wait to see this go in, like for Marcaine and all that, like all those big, injections, like, it's multiple needles, like, especially in big ortho cases and stuff like that. That's how those patients get up the next day, or in the next couple of hours, they're not feeling any pain from the hip or the knee replacement because they're full of Marcaine. I'm like, that's why it hurts 3 days later. Because we injected you really well with Marcaine. So let's get back to a couple more questions here that in the chat, which is amazing. So this is a question: did the hospital you have a policy about anything that you developed that while under their employment could be patented by them?
The hospital that I was working in at that time did not have that policy, but as I started connecting with other nurse entrepreneurs, I did learn about different hospital systems having those kinds of policies in place. The hospital I was in did not have that policy.
That's great. So nurses, this is very important to pay attention to when you're signing all those big contracts. You know what I mean? Like, you can definitely circle that and say, I need to take this up before you sign that. I need to consult with somebody else, because that is very important. And this is a feature I want to add to SONSIEL for the members, that, getting a lawyer saying, if I do come up with an idea, you're not taking the ball and running with it. So that's because nurses do have so many great ideas, and that big institutions take them and run with them. So that's great. I'm very happy for you. So what would be the cost effectiveness compared to the current options? Oh, did we lose Hilario?
Great question.
Yeah. Yep.
No, I'm here.
There you are. Sorry, you just moved.
That's a fantastic question. So this technology provides cost savings in many different ways. So the first way that we are going to provide cost savings, as you can see, for the traditional process, you have one syringe and 2 different needles that you have to use for each medication in the emergency room setting, or anywhere that we have to switch needles, which is just about every unit in the hospital, right? That has a cost of the syringe plus 2 needles, plus the associated packaging, the sterilization cost of those 3 different components. So there's going to be a savings automatically across the supply chain, and having just one syringe that has the needles already inside of it, right? Less packaging, less materials. That's one way. 2, we would evaluate, there's a cost for the syringe and the 2 safety needles compared to one syringe that once is matched with the 2 safety needles would probably be around the same price as a 2 safety needles plus a syringe. However, one cost factor, in addition to helping reduce accidental needle sticks, which there's an average cost between $3,000 and $1 million for each needle stick injury. So if we help reduce needle stick injuries just by, let's say, 20% with this technology, we're going to be helping hospitals and healthcare save significant amount of money. But one other cost factor that I would say as well is the time savings. So as you can imagine, there's a cost for each provider that the hospital has to pay for. So if we're saving, say going from 3 minutes in the most given procedure, which is injections, to about 20 or 30 seconds, there's a significant enough reduction of time there per clinician that can be attributed to a cost factor with this technology. So these are all numbers that obviously a CFO would be able to crunch out, but we have multiple ways that we'll be able to not just help hospitals save money, but ultimately this technology will come out much more inexpensive than the traditional safety syringe, which has an added cost, hidden cost of 50 cents per injection due to the cost of treating a needle stick injury. So let's say if a syringe and 2 needles cost, let's say, 40 or 50 cents, there's an automatic 50 cents that's added to each unit because of the cost attributed to an accidental needle stick. And we already have, the data and the numbers of the CDC on what that cost is.
Right, and as you know, because of HIPAA, and this is very important, especially like the OR nurses, if you get a needle stick or you get sliced with that, with the blade, it's an automatic protocol. You got to go on HIV meds because unless you can get the patient to consult, and that's huge too, because that's a huge, that's now a report, and that's, that's covered by, sometimes it's covered by the cost of the hospital because, there was like a workers' comp quote unquote thing. So yeah, so that's having something like this is huge.
Hey, Hilario, Nancy Nager, I'm on the board of SONSIEL. Just to follow up on that question, do you have a pro forma on this yet? Do you have kind of a comparison pro forma so hospitals will be interested in your product, which is excellent?
We don't have one yet. So we're working on finalizing this prototype, enhancing the prototype, a bit more refinement, so we can do a small pilot trial to be able to publish that data in a journal. We have an infomercial, very professional infomercial video that we did that shows how the technology works, and that's a comparison with the traditional process. But that's our next milestones, and that's what we're hoping to be able to achieve in the next months, and being able to get the resources and support necessary to achieve that very important milestone. Because I believe, Nancy, we believe that once we're able to demonstrate that, then I think it's just going to change, everything from there.
Yeah, that's the point.
That's
We want to get this sold.
goal.
We want to get this sold to the hospitals. So yeah, good plan.
Thank you, Nancy. And any suggestions, of course, anyone has in regards to that, next milestone for us, or any resources, or feel free to, of course, share. Love to hear about it.
Not that I like to promote everything cross-culturally, but I do know that ANA's new challenge was with Stryker, which could be an interesting alignment for you to at least put in for that competition, Hilario. Because Stryker, as you know, in the medical device space is really interesting. I think to your point, and Nancy, you have some experience with that early raise to get into trials is tricky, right? So I think some of those questions, and I know I had to step away for a minute, but what I heard, a couple of those is really coming down to the cost structure, your cost structure versus what's currently on the market versus what it's going to cost a hospital. And then there's cost savings and then associated risks as well. And making that clear is going to be really important, especially for that next investor. And have you quantified how much you need to raise for that next step? Like, what are you looking at? Did you guys answer that already? How much are you looking to raise for your next perspective?
Yep. So to achieve those next milestones, we're looking to raise 200,000 to achieve those next milestones. That would get us, that would really put us in a comfortable position to have a finalized product developed with, a pilot trial and even regulatory, pathway clearance as well. So
what I like about your product too, and some of these would not work, but have you, what is that group? There's been some really interesting pickup on nursing being supported on, what's that platform that people can put their products on and they can cloud fundraise? Nance, what am I thinking? You guys remember the cloud? What is that platform? That cloud-based platform where you can put that idea forward. And I'm going to search it, but that largely nurses' ideas have not been well funded. My internet I know is unstable, so, but I'm going to market fit is very easy to sort of understand. So that's one that I would look at too. Let me find it.
Okay. Okay.
Faith,
Definitely make sure to take a look into that. Let's see. I wonder if there's any more questions in the chats that I have not answered.
Let's see. Nope, you're good right now. Susan, do you have any more to? I mean, she was great. Oh, are you thinking of a Kickstarter for Megan?
yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking of. It looks like there's a whole bunch of other companies out there, but yes, Kickstarter is the one I was thinking of. I'm going to put it right up the link up on there. But there is a whole bunch of, it looks like a whole bunch of new funding platforms that are out there. But the good news is, Hilario, like if you can even get it out there and say that like 40 or 50 or 200 nurses invested $10, right? And you could say, please identify if you're a nurse or a paramedic or an EMT. Suddenly, and they're like, yes, I need this device. Suddenly you going and raising funds from others because it serves as both a pilot feedback group. It shows that you got interest by these communities. And I think that's actually something that a lot of us could be thinking about that have an actual product that you guys could manage from there. This is a long link, but that's how I would look at it, because it almost accomplishes 2 or 3 goals in that one. And honestly, what you find is if you can get, you need 2 things, right? You need large amount of money to come and do this, or you need large amounts of endorsements by healthcare professionals that's going to convince those with the money to invest. And this Kickstarter campaign could do that exactly for you, could do both. So all of a sudden, if 100 nurses put in $1 each, suddenly like $100 invested in this. I don't know the processes. Kickstarter is, for my understanding, is for non-sophisticated investors, I think. So there is some good stuff on that. There's some worries, there's some specifications around it, but I could be really, it could be really interesting. And I might, we might need to have you, if you decide to go this path, Hilario, like, let's see if we can build a process for other nurses who have devices that might want to put their device on Kickstarter. And we could put it together a SONSIEL committee about how you do a campaign on Kickstarter being a nurse. Like, I think that let's talk if this is of interest. Like, it's always us like on the spur. I haven't thought through, so. Who else? Anybody else have you guys thinking of it? Thank you, Megan, for clarifying. You were absolutely right. All right. Hilario, that was great, you guys. I so apologize. The fire alarm went off, so I just had the whole fire department in my house saying our house was on fire. It was not, but apologies for stepping away. So I think what we should do is let's turn it over here. Hilario, stay on, but let's have some other people jump in here, introduce themselves. What problems are you guys facing? And let's dive in. And I know, Bill, you're new, and I wanted to hear from you as well. So who wants?
Well, I'm never shy. I'll jump in. I'm Susan Kennedy Buck. I'm with the University of Delaware, and the building behind me is a photo. It's not, although my patients often wonder if I'm sitting in the parking lot talking to them. No, I'm not. So I'm a nurse practitioner, as well as I teach healthcare informatics. I have recently completing a certificate in entrepreneurship, which was fun for me to go and add another degree. It was fun. But the whole point of it being is that I am, as a person who educates new nurses, all the way from, oh, look, it's earwax, it's cool, to those who are putting, who are basically intubating people. I have a lot of opportunity to speak with a lot of nurses. And one of the neat things about working with nurses, especially young nurses, is they have lots and lots of great ideas. But especially at the early starts of the career, there's not a whole lot of thought about encouraging that, because we're a profession where it's very rare that you can walk out and graduate and kill somebody the next day. So obviously people have to follow protocols. They have to be very regimented. So we kind of burn that enthusiasm out. So, and when I'm talking to the people at UD in entrepreneurship, and I'm telling them about this, we basically are not helping students to develop that creativity piece. And so I think, but one of the things that I brought up was that who is then training, because I teach MBA students too, who is taking those students and making them realize that there is validity in encouraging all these bright ideas to go forward. And I do think that the, being concerned about intellectual property has got to be taken care of. So that was a great comment. But at the same point in time, who's teaching these baby managers to get out and to really encourage the people who have that are frontline and have all these great ideas? Who's working with them to help them be ready to address that? And so my challenge to this group is to say, okay, so let's look at nurses, but then let's also look at the nurse managers. Let's look at the nurse, not so much the entrepreneurs, but let's look at the people who have control over what those nurses do, and what kind of education can we bring forth to help them realize that they're really helping themselves, they're helping their hospitals, and by and large, I mean, for the most part, they're helping the patients, which is the bottom line. So that was my spiel that I wanted to share. But this is really, I've popped in a couple of times, but this is really my first meeting. So hello. And in my area, I'm
Well, we
really
are so glad you're here.
I'm more of a consumer informatics than anything else. I work in VR technology and working on some specific things to help patients be able to become. We actually are working with something to help students be more relaxed when they're taking exams, as well as those high stakes exams, where especially with they've got those mannequins that it's a do or die kind of thing. So we're working with doing some mindfulness work with VR to try to get them to chill out a little bit before they go into those high stakes, hopefully teaching them skills that they'll carry forward when they get into stressful situations with real patients. Thank you.
Susan, I'm so glad that you're here, and how you said that our protocols in place, because they can step out and kill somebody the next day, are burning out that fundamental feeling of creativity is such a great way on how you said that. And I'm so glad that you're here, because Nancy, Nager, Faith, there were several of us 6 years ago that really were at the sort of the beginning of this nurse innovation movement, and academia was 100% opposed to this movement, right? Because that was exactly their concern, that we can't take risks because risk means killing people, right? And I think that's why this, from a very early stage, we weren't sure what was going to happen, and then we started to find each other and starting to hear these success stories and figuring out places and how we can support each other to do these things safely. Because let's be honest, that's how innovation happens. It happens across healthcare. They do it for physicians all the time. We need to create those pathways for nurses. But
now, if you look at the major organizations, every single one of them now has something with entrepreneurship. I'm the co-leader of the healthcare informatics and telehealth work group for AANP, but we also have one that also deals with entrepreneurship. Also, basically AACN, the one that controls all of our academia, they're acting like entrepreneurship is this great new thing that has occurred, and they're in on it. So again, it's glad, so our job is to say, how do we support that? But the problem is, if you were a nurse, if you had entrepreneurship in any of your classes, when you became a nurse, raise your hand. Most of you were not. And so that's the problem. I mean, even with informatics, we're realizing that even in, as low level as there's life beyond the EHR when you talk about informatics, and that's really part of where I am. But the problem is that we didn't get that as younger nurses, and nursing was a second career for me. So I was a little older than most of you probably when I became a nurse. But the bottom line is that we really are not teaching this in school and really not encouraging it. So therefore, this is something, again, that we all can do better at. But Hilario, that's what you're just such a wonderful textbook case of basically having that great idea, but then having, going forward with it and taking a risk. And so yay to you. Thank you for sharing this with us all. It's been very, very helpful to hear that.
Thank you, Susan.
Give us
Appreciate
courage.
You do as well, Susan, with everything you've done. And I definitely touched on a very important topic that I think is part of the conversation of some of the problems we're trying to resolve as nurse entrepreneurs. And I was speaking about that with Rebecca, that I believe as the years go by, there's going to be a bigger push and more momentum for nurse-led technology, entrepreneurship, and support. So certainly just glad to be part of that wave.
Who next?
I guess I could go. Hi, everybody. Bill Schuler. I'm brand new. Thank you for inviting me to attend today. So my background is emergency nursing mostly, and about 5 years ago, I made the switch into patient safety. So I work as a patient safety specialist here in the Pacific Northwest for a hospital system. And we are part of a larger hospital system that is in 7 states in the United States. We're the 3rd largest health system. So it's Providence. I'll just say it's Providence Health System. Anyway, I work for the Oregon region. So I help look at patient safety for 8 hospitals. And, prior to this, while I was in the ER, I became more involved in violence prevention. And that seems to be where my passion lies. And so I did, for my previous health system for Legacy Health, I was their clinical educator for violence prevention. And then I transitioned over to Providence and, new role, so new responsibilities. And eventually I'm participating in violence prevention heavily here at Providence. But kind of where I'm going right now is trying to create a new position, and that would be similar to a violence prevention project manager, which, when I search, around the nation, it really doesn't exist yet. That type of position where there's one person that looks at all the stuff that we need to do with violence prevention, and there's more focus on it from the Joint Commission. There's some new rules that are coming in place in 2022. There's also more, national legislative push for everybody in healthcare to provide violence prevention education. So that, it passed the U.S. House, and it's waiting in the Senate, this year. So there's been some increased national focus. So, hopefully creating this position for my current employer, is maybe one of the steps. Ideally, I'd like to fill that position at least for a little bit. My ultimate goal is to go out on my own and really, either develop my own educational course or even consulting, because I think typically when you look at consulting for violence prevention, it's more the people who do it are more ex-law enforcement, military professionals. They kind of have the market, but not a lot of clinical people have the market. And I think there's a big value in having a clinical person, help address violence prevention in healthcare, because the medical reasons and the behavioral health reasons for somebody to be violent vast outweighs the non-behavioral health or non-clinical reasons why. So, my personal philosophy and my personal mission, I came to the conclusion before I left the ER, was that there's plenty of us caring for the patient. There's not a lot of us caring for the caregiver, especially in regards to workplace violence or being a victim of violence in the workplace. I even overextended myself last year to help a caregiver that had, been a victim of violence. And, they reported it to law enforcement, and it went, of course, to the DA for possible charges. And I was trying to help the caregiver through that process, but I got disciplined because that was outside of my scope. I get it, right? I get it, but so maybe in this new position, I can push the envelope a little bit. I can break some rules a little bit just to help move it forward. And really, it would be, help us move to the next level of supporting our caregivers after they're assaulted, because it is a huge problem. We know the data. But I'm also heavily involved in the Emergency Nurses Association. So I'm currently their chair of their Advocacy Advisory Council. So that's another avenue that I can, fulfill my personal mission and, really take the safety of our healthcare workers as well as, patient safety to the next level. I guess that's a brief, just a brief about who I am and what I'm about.
Hey, do you want to jump in and give your thought real quick? Because I don't know if you want to jump in, because I know you posted a comment, and then I know, Holly, you want to connect with Bill external to this, but. I know it keeps telling my internet's unstable. So Debbie, I don't know if you want to come on, but Debbie asked if you had connected with the Safe States or American Trauma Society or Society of Trauma Nursing. Debbie works as an injury prevention professional with the 3 of them. I don't know if you guys have connected before, but you should definitely connect. Debbie has an incredible background of actually starting her own business based off of years of experience. And actually, Nancy Nager, similar situation, turned down being a chief executive officer of a hospital and then launched her own business. And I'll be honest, I think to your point, if you can, I think that there's a few of us that would be happy to help you learn how you write a job description and how you position it in hospital systems. We've done that for a couple other people that have moved their career forward, outlining new positions. You do have to find your, what's the word? You need to find your champions in your system before you even get to that. That would be willing to take it. Do you feel you have a few of those people?
Yeah, we have our one of our CEO that's the executive sponsor of violence prevention. She's supportive of it. Our regional director of security and safety, excuse me, is and we've preliminarily got approval for funds, for monies for this position, and we just kind of developed the job description already. So it's in place. We do have to go to a bunch of executives and ask for their approval. So that's kind of the next step next week. But Debbie, I'll look into it. Thank you for posting that.
You're welcome. I'm sorry, I couldn't get to my unmute and video soon enough. So good luck. I just maybe I may add that if there's a way for you to maybe start doing a some sort of a podcast or a YouTube informational type program, so that you could start, instead of waiting for a position to get posted, just start disseminating your message out there, so that way you become known as the expert in that field. I think that would be a great thing, and also it's going to help you focus in on what your message is, and what you really want to begin with as far as who you want to help, because there's it could be workplace violence, it could be domestic violence, it can be intimate partner violence. There's so many different types of violence out there. So knowing where you want to start is going to help you also. So I wish you all the best and great work.
Yeah, thank you, Debbie. Yeah, when you look at podcasts, there really is no podcast for violence prevention in healthcare. It doesn't exist yet. So yeah, I've looked at that, but it's like, oh, that's a leap. There's always there's a gap I need to cross, and I haven't crossed it yet. The fear of going out on your own. I think I'm pretty sure all of us have it. Some of you are way ahead of me, but I'm kind of behind the gap yet. Just like, I have all these ideas and I haven't taken the leap yet.
You have a face for podcasts, and you're very articulate. And your message comes from the heart, and that's going to be well received.
Okay, thank you.
And you know what? And Dr. Princess Fumi, I mean, she has been an expert. I have to say, Princess, when I watch what you do, stuff, it's you out there, you've created such a presence of yourself, a lot of videos. I don't know if you know this, one of the first nurse practitioners to open up psychiatric practices and across a highly restricted state of Arizona. She owns multiple practices, dealing with a lot of immigrant population, women populations that have been severely abused. She really is shaking things up in that. So even following Fumi right now, Stephanie right here, you guys should look into some of the work she's done. But Bill, I'm going to invite I'm going to make sure that you get that Outcomes Rocket Nursing link, so you can come in and we can just talk about your role and in your position. Maybe writing a blog that we published on SONSIEL, why this is important. Very important things. The more you can reference statistics, the more you can reference dollars, that kind of stuff immediately establishes you as an expert, because they're usually ones. And as you guys know, what we're finding is that 2% of all media attention is in healthcare is only spoken to or spoken about by nurses. So 98% is people external to nurses talking about these ones. And there is a huge, what you're going to be shocked at is how many people are looking for you. And so so if you don't feel comfortable taking that leap by yourself, anybody on this, you guys have an area you're passionate about, send us a 600-word blog that you've authored. We're going to publish it. Like this, I know we're not a peer literature review journal, and that's okay. But once you guys start doing 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 blogs, your whole world is going to change. So those are some of the easy steps that I think that you guys could do do for those things. And Pal, like, if you want to talk about school nursing, like, write us a blog, like, we'll edit it and we'll get those out there. But I think that's what we were never trained to do as nurses. We were told we're a jack of all trades, really an expert of none. So we never carved out what our niches are. And that's the mistake that we've made as a profession. Like, hearing Hilario's story, knowing that he's becoming the expert in needle sticks and safety prevention, that's going to be somebody that's going to have a lot of value in the future, and these other ones will. So I want you guys to think about, what are you passionate about? What is that niche that you feel that your voice, you don't feel like you are? What I also want to tell you is, do not get on that train wagon, which is probably what you're seeing in some of this entrepreneurship. Everybody who's never been an entrepreneur out there talking about being an entrepreneur, right? Like, do something that you have credibility in, right? Do something that you feel good about, and let me tell you, the rest will follow. So we all have that skill set. We all feel passionately about something, so own it. Nancy, any thoughts on that too? Anything?
No, what I put in the chat to Bill is that, you can't succeed unless you try. And, there are a lot of us here who can kind of help you along that path. But, the leap is really the most important part. You have the expertise, you have all of the background, the credibility, you just need to launch it. And I think you're going to do great.
So technically we can go to 8, we can stay on a little bit after you guys. Sometimes this goes to 8:30, it's a small group, but I don't want anybody, I know that it gets very nerve wracking to come out and talk. So please come on out, you guys, ask it. You may think it seems like a stupid question. It could be something that you're like, oh, I can't ask it because it should be simple. My guess is it's not simple, and no question is stupid. We in nursing have often, I feel like we were trained not to ask questions if we didn't know the answer. You know how we got made to feel in nursing school, right? Like, oh, don't want to be shown that we made a mistake. So guys, all about innovation entrepreneurship is learning how to fail gracefully and fail forward. And actually, failing is really just a step towards success. If you don't fail, obviously, no offense, it means you're probably not doing something right. So
I'm so new. I'd love to hear what everybody else is
wants to
working
jump
on.
in. Who else has a question?
I'd just like to hear what everybody else is working on, just because it's, some new, and it's fun to always hear what other people are doing, just so that I can see that it is possible.
Can I just share a little bit? Hi, Rebecca. Thank you. This is Princess Fumi. Thank you so much for that shout out. I was trying to be quiet here. Well, just like she said, I'm in Arizona. I relocated from Nashville, Tennessee, because they did not have that opportunity for nurses to be able to practice independently. So I decided to just move myself. And while we moved, then the pandemic happened. And as the pandemic happened, as terrible as the whole situation is, it's actually opened up doors for nurses to even actually expand and explore further what they could do. And so for me, I always love storytelling. I believe in the power of rehabilitative storytelling, particularly with patients that have trauma, just like Rebecca said. And so I was able to use that as my platform to actually open clinics. And in the last 2 years, we've opened 3 clinics, and they're doing incredibly well. Also use that rehabilitative story to kind of touch the hearts of those who are traumatic, and particularly those who come from silent cultures that are patients. And so that is what I do with my Johnson & Johnson. That's my part of Johnson & Johnson project. And after speaking with Noah, by the way, I want to shout him out. I really, really thank him for really bringing me in and kind of cinching things for me and saying, okay, don't get that big, but just go straight into what you love to do. And so what I've done, the phase that I'm in right now, is bringing myself out there on the platform. So many of you who have been watching me, you'll see that I've been on ABC, CBS, and some. I'm just keeping pushing that so that by the time my products and services are ready, I'm out there, I'm known as an expert in mental health, and that's what I'm doing right now. So whatever it is that you're doing, just like Rebecca said, blogs help a lot. SONSIEL actually featured me, featured one of my blogs, and we've been moving that incredibly well. So blogs help. I also have podcasts that was picked up by iHeartRadio. You just never know who is watching you. So a lot of people watch me and reach out to me and say, hey, can you come and speak? Can you come and say something about what you're doing as an entrepreneur? A lot of our nurses, we believe in just being in the background and let everybody else take the glory. Well, while that is fine, we are in an era now where we really need to push forward. We look at the televisions right now and we see all these experts, talking about the pandemic, and we're the ones at the bedside. So what is going on? So it's time for us nurses. If we say we want changes, then we have to be the change. We have to move out of our uncomfortable zone into comfort zone, saying, hey, we're here, we're experts too. We know what we're doing. We see people directly. Not only that, we also practice. We practice, our outcomes are incredible. And so because of that, that is what I'm doing now, pushing forward, and people calling me an expert at trauma. So whatever it is that you want to try to do, sit back and figure out, what is my platform and how can I bring it from the back to the forefront? So thank you.
I love everything you're doing. I love it, and I love seeing you out there. And honestly, you guys, it's literally taking that first step. And you're to what Princess said. It's a first step, and the rest will follow, especially when you know what you're talking about. So keep going.
Can I jump in, Rebecca?
Anybody else have some thoughts? Anything, please?
So it seems like we've got a theme here tonight about taking care of nurses. So a little bit about me. My name's Robert Wingo. I was an oncology nurse early in my career. I did that about 5 years, but I was a nerd long before I was a nurse. So I made the jump to nursing informatics and doing clinical information systems and so forth. I've been doing that for 24 years, with 22 of that being specializing in nurse staffing and scheduling. And so that's always a hot topic. Understaffing has been a huge topic for years, and especially with the pandemic, we were exceptionally challenged with that, of trying to find enough resources and spread them around. And we heard, all of this stuff about burnout. We've got burnout and stress and anxiety. And we've got a lot of nurses that are retiring. We've got a lot of other nurses that are running for the exit. They're looking for anything they can find to do that's not at the bedside. And the poor staffing has a lot to do with that. But what would you say if you found out that one of the factors in this poor chronic understaffing that we've had for so many years may actually be contributed to a systemic flaw in a popular nursing budget methodology that has been around for at least 30 years. And that appears to be what I have stumbled upon. So this flaw, when I discovered it about 4 years ago, I started talking to people about it. And I got one of two responses. When I pointed out the flaw with the formula that I found, they said, oh, but we've always done it this other way. The other response that I got from people is well, nobody's going to listen to you because you're going to show that, yes, in fact, they are short-staffed and need to hire more nurses. Okay, great. So over the past 4 years, I've talked to many executives and thought leaders and people in the community. I even wrote to one, well-known author, which if you've read the journals and I mentioned her name, you would recognize it. She's supposed to be one of the experts in nursing budgets and productivity. I wrote to her because there was an article she published a few years ago that had this flawed formula in it. So I sent her a nice email about my concerns about it and provided a mathematical proof. And she replied back, well, thank you for your email, but I've always done it this way. And I've worked with 3 of the biggest consulting firms, and that's the way they do it too. So this flaw, I've identified it in many, many journal articles. It's in books that have been published on budgeting and finance. I found it in white papers, materials from consultants, and I've got a mathematical framework that I think will actually could help to solve some of this. It sounds kind of clickbaitish, but I'm actually working on a blog and contemplating putting a white paper out this summer. I'm taking the summer off to do a project around this. And I'm halfway tempted to post up a blog post that says, this one simple formula could solve the nursing shortage, because it's only half tongue in cheek. Because once you understand the math, and I think my hope is that once this information gets out there, and I'm going to be targeting the nurse managers and the floor staff, because if I can get them to understand it, we can put pressure from the bottom up. But once this information is out there and people understand the mathematical relationships between the pieces of their budget, any facility that ends up being chronically understaffed, it'll have to be because it's a conscious decision by leadership, because they would be refusing to look at what's going on and look at the root cause and sit down and discuss what they're going to do about it. So that's what I'm working on this summer. I've still got a lot more research to do. Like I said, I'm working on setting up my blog. Ultimately, I'm probably hoping to get into some consulting. Last year, AONL, the ANA, and HFMA put out a huge report, with concerns about staffing and scheduling and budgeting, and saying that nursing and finance needed to learn how to talk to each other. Well, I've figured out sort of the translation table for that. And I think with the formulas I've developed and the knowledge I have to develop a curriculum, I believe it actually opens up a new opportunity for a new nursing informatics specialist that's well-versed in staffing and scheduling and budgeting, and knows how to deal with data, and in partnering with finance and nursing. There's a lot that they could do to really head off a lot of the scenarios and situations that would contribute to burnout, because they would actually be able to go in and calculate, well, this month, I've got, this many vacant positions, I've got this many people on FML, this many people on orientation. How much do I really have to spend for my PTO request, or somebody wants to go to a conference? Because what happens now is they overspend on that. They go ahead and approve all this stuff. They don't understand how many hours they have that they can dedicate to that. And so they approve all of this non-productive time, and then what they've got left over, they put at the bedside. And then you find out when you show up for work, it's like, oh my God, we're 2 nurses short tonight. What happened? So I'm targeting probably early fall to kind of get this ball rolling. I'm anticipating that it's going to upset and embarrass some people, but this information is too important. Some of the stuff that I'm going to be publishing, I'm planning on putting it out under a Creative Commons license, which would allow people to distribute it and look at it and so forth, so long as they're not using it for commercial gain. There are pieces of that I can put out there, and there are still some more detailed pieces that hopefully they would come to me for some consulting services. I'm not going to give away the whole enchilada, but put the teaser information out there. And I'm really serious, guys. That one simple formula, it's halfway tongue in cheek. If I can get that formula in the hands of some of the nurse managers out there and just get them to do the math, I think the light bulb is going to go on for a lot of people, and hopefully I can make a dent in this nursing shortage problem. And my goal is to get people talking. My goal is to get finance talking, and get nursing talking, HFMA and ANA. I'm going to be reaching out to these guys. They're probably not going to be real happy with me initially, but my goal is not to really call anybody out or point any fingers. I'm trying to crowdsource a solution to the nursing shortage and some of these nursing burnout issues.
No, I think everybody's very curious about it, Robert. So I think to your point, the next step is, and happy to talk with you about this. And I think even Bill's interested in talking to you about it. Like they're obviously, to your point, there's going to have to be some substance behind the magic, right? Because I think everybody thinks that there's a silver bullet for this crisis, and most of the big consulting companies out there in the world say there is none. So I love this, and I really want to explore this because to be honest, so I'm not sure that you have the right market entry point, in my opinion, because I'm not sure you're going to get a nurse manager to buy into it. I think you're going to have to look external to groups that are already disrupting the market that might be interested in this, that are providing some of those external tools to some of those health systems. So let's talk more about these ones. So who else wants to come on? I think Dean, you just joined on camera. Do you want to come off? Thank you.
We could go do Sure. I'm not a nurse. I work with a nursing organization that has developed an app that integrates with PowerChart to provide a nurse shift change report. So at the click of the button, it provides all of the data that's already there in a one-page report that can be printed out or viewed online, so that nurses don't have to take time in transferring data of what's going on, and also to reduce errors. And we have a great, as far as research, report from the Joint Commission a few years ago about nurse shift change reporting. But we're waiting to make our first sale. That's where we're at today. Any suggestions?
Well, I sold into healthcare systems with my first company, and it's an 18-month sales cycle. Just to give you a heads up, Nancy was a former chief exec at a hospital system. And the hardest thing that you have in this situation, I guess we'd have to have a better understanding of your technology, how you integrate, and what access points you have, because obviously most healthcare systems are dominated by 3 major EMRs. So where you're pulling that information from, and what is that, and then how it addresses in your API links. So I'm sure Bill can talk to you about this. What we're hearing from healthcare systems, Dean, not to discourage anything, is that the major players are really major players in this space right now. And so many of the companies that have been successful in integrating are not starting in your healthcare systems. They're not able to get into hospitals. They have to land in digital health companies, that especially around nurse-led products, because nurses are a cost structure to hospital systems, and they really tend not to invest back in nursing technology that's exclusive to nursing. If it was physician-based, yes. Now we're hoping that's going to change, but but I'm going to give you a breakthrough that's happened recently. There's a woman by the name of Hiam Nadell, who now is the first director of innovations ever at Massachusetts General Hospital, which was a position appointed to the first nurse ever to take on and identify products, processes, and protocols that were either nurse developed or beneficial to the nursing workforce, that she has been able to fast track into Mass General for short-term pilots. Pilots usually are the death of startups at most institutions because they aren't long enough to be of significant value. However, Hiam's position has started to replicate across the United States, and you see people, actually one of Princess's cohorts, Charlene Platten, who's doing the same position at Stanford Healthcare. You see Nancy Albert, who's over at Cleveland Clinic. You're seeing the new position at Rush. So what I would be looking for at these positions are these new director of innovations, Nicole Lincoln over at Boston Medical Center, who are nurses who have been added a title of innovation to their research title, who are willing to have a conversation with you. I don't want to rain on your parade because it is a painful one, but some of the companies immediately coming to mind that made it upstream is a company such as NurseGrid. Joe Novella was one of our founding board members at SONSIEL, one of the largest exit in nursing history. His company, NurseGrid, was a nurse staffing based model for swaps of shifts of everything along those lines. They were eventually acquired by a company called HealthStream, which is probably the largest staffing platform for nurse-led ones. His company was going after hospital systems. he had to start in nursing homes to gain traction. There's a more independent systems and purchasing products that the nurse is the center caregiver. And so investing in nursing makes sense in nursing homes, home care, external, processes, places like dialysis centers where errors happen. So I think where the misconception is, and probably also where you're hitting this if you've looked at investors, is they're like, if you're selling into hospital systems, like, we're not going to invest. It's been a long slog. And does anybody else want to jump in here and give some insight as well into that? And we can have a conversation offline, and I'm happy to have a conversation with you and give you some insights. But those would be the three things I would look at. Go downstream, look for nurses with the title of innovation in their title, see if you can get in a meeting. And then two, start looking at, obviously you're gonna have to answer the question on how you integrate with the big EHRs from there. But Nance, Bill, anybody else that's worked in this space?
I just put something in the chat to Bill, because whenever I worked in a hospital, I always explained to people about the data, about the financial impact, and how the two relate between clinical and fiscal. And people really loved it because they finally understood why people were telling them to do things. And I think nurses so often just, they're running around where everybody's so busy, and you just, well, this is how it's done, and this is what you need to do, rather than understanding what's behind it. Why is it like that? How can we change it? What is the data telling us? What is, the financial impact? I really think there's some opportunity here.
And I would say, in the patient safety realm, we have come across, patient safety events where, there's preventable harm that happens even through handoffs. So, we use Epic. So I'll just, say it right there. But what I'll say is, sometimes it's pre-built, sometimes it's not what you want, and so you make a change, but then it's pulling tooth and nail because it has to go through so many committees just to get something changed in the EHR, and it can take up to a year. And that it's interesting because sometimes there's two different things that are two different EHR systems that are trying to interface, which can create its own problems too. Like, for example, lab uses Cerner, documentation uses Epic. They don't really talk to each other. They're separate ones. So there's, sometimes you have to bring in third-party software to talk. But from what I anticipate and from what I know from our chief medical information officer, to make changes like that and to even maybe bring in a new product, it's quite a big lift. And it takes a while.
So actually, to your point, one thing that you were just talking about, Bill, one of the things that you could, Dean, we'll have to figure out, can you drop the name of the company, the URL, and the thing? I would love to look it up. Some of the companies that I've had see be successful, and you're not going to like this answer, is they worked with smaller EHRs that they all came together and partnered to work together on a multi-solution set. So what you've seen in some of the spaces, and again, these new EHRs are breaking into subspecialty or areas that are specialty. Now, within acute settings, unfortunately, those EHRs are going to be dominated by the Epics and the Cerners of the world, and potentially whatever that med one is. But you still have your outpatient settings, and you have your home care, and you have your telehealth, and you have these new EHRs that are jumping up. And there was a really interesting one that I was just talking to in the nursing home space that has who else was on that call? Nobody on this phone call. There are interesting ones, and I think that might be some of it. So you already work part of Cerner? Oh, okay, and Epic for sure. So all right, we'll look up. Oh, so the report is an app in Cerner's power chart. So, but they're not bundling you for sales, I'm guessing. Is that the challenge? We'll have to have a sidebar on this. Okay.
That's the challenge. The challenge is we have to sell it ourselves. But
okay.
It's there, it's existing, it's ready to go.
Okay, all right. So, and I'm guessing you've already made your target list of who uses Cerner in the United States, which the largest one is the VA. Have you gone after the VA? Are you any chance that any of you guys are veterans?
We're not veterans, but we're already looking at the VA.
So I'm going to have to give you a heads up. I don't know what you need to do, but you need to, I don't know if you know this about the VA system. If you bring in a founder of somebody who has 25% ownership of your company with I don't know how much you've raised or not, but with the veteran status, you are much more adapted. And also there is just significant things. And also, so I think you're going to have to hire, to get a VA contract, there's companies that specifically work in this space to get VA contracts. Is it Boston? What's that one in Boston, Nancy? Boston, it's a company. I'm going to search for you right now. But the truth is the biggest contract for Cerner, the reason Cerner is still alive is the VA, but you really need to bring in, you're not going to get a contract with the VA likely without having somebody on your team having some kind of veteran status. Not impossible, but very likely. Do you guys know what I'm talking about here? Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Questions? Anything here?
No, I can't think of it.
What do you think of his name?
It's late, Rebecca.
I know, it's late. I'm like trying to figure out who these guys were again. But those things, who else? Booz Allen supports multiple contracts in the VA. All right, Megan, very good. Inclusive of Cerner work. I'd be happy to connect to members of my firm to hear you pitch. And do you have a nurse as a part of your founding team, Dean? Good. All right, then we'll help. Because there's been a lot of companies that made a lot of money off of nurses, but they don't have nurses on their team, and that's what we got to do. So Megan, Dean, can you two connect and give us an update? And I will do some work behind the scenes to see if I can make some connections happen as well. I'm very good friends with the assistant chief nursing officer for the entire VA system. He was actually my old floor manager when I used to take students to the VA. So he made it very, when I called him about another product, he goes, I need a veteran on the product. I need the veteran on the product to move this forward for you. So, however, they have launched a new innovation center. Obviously it shut down via COVID for anything that was non that, but that's something else you can work with. And also connecting with, what I would suggest also doing is connecting through LinkedIn with a couple nurses who work in the VA in that area, and see if they would also review your product and perhaps introduce you into the system. Just to give you a heads up. Anybody else? That's great though. That's really cool. Cerner, wow, Cerner, that's impressive. Go ahead, Dana, you're on mute.
Hi. Hi, everyone. I'm Dana. It's really great to be here with you. I'm kind of at an inflection point in my career. I started out bedside nursing, did a master's in informatics, and then I went into industry for 15 years. And so I've worked in early product concepting and innovation type roles at Intel Corporation, and implemented Vocera and worked with the Office of the National Coordinator as when I worked for Deloitte. And so a lot of different kind of various experiences. And then I went back to, I wanted to get closer to healthcare and really address some challenges that I experienced when I was frontline nursing that industry wasn't interested in addressing. And so I went back and got a PhD in informatics in 2018. And now I'm at a point where it's like, I'm trying to figure out if I really belong in academia or if I need to go back to industry. So I'm trying to decrease my FTE so that I don't have to use all my nights and evenings to do this, but I'm actually exploring a product concept that's looking at use of location tracking data in healthcare, but using it not in a big brother sort of way, but to really get nurses the help that they need and to justify and create information about the context that's going on. And the initial use case that I'm thinking about doing is really looking at like 2- and 3-person time. When you're given a patient assignment, you know that you can't do everything alone and there's this expected give and take. But if you were to ask any nurse manager, like, well, what % of your nurse's time is spent on average in 2- and 3-person tasks? They probably wouldn't be able to tell you because this data is currently invisible to us. So in my dissertation, I looked at like nurse call, Vocera, medication dispensing, different types of data and pulled them together and found that you can use that data to predict unplanned overtime. But the hospital systems just aren't ready for real-time analysis on those data because they're all in different silos. So you can do it retrospectively, but when you try to bring it into real time, you know, you're like into this, you know, non-integrated data problem. So I'm like, location data is simple. It's a single data source. There's a lot I think that we can do just with that alone. And my return on investment, I think I'd focus on decreased cost of injuries, unplanned overtime and turnover, and see if we couldn't make a justification in that way. But I'm looking for a facility that has this already installed and is willing to contribute data to do a proof of concept I'm also looking for a, CNO or director level person who's willing to really engage and say, would we use it? What process would need to be, we would need to be paired with very flexible staffing, which is another big change that would have to occur alongside this. Is that something that a facility would be willing to do? And I've also wondered if maybe I need to go to long-term care or something else before trying to hit directly in a hospital. So I'll be quiet and just would love your guys' thoughts, reactions, and suggestions.
Real quick, Dana, what system did you need them to use as a baseline?
I'm looking for indoor location tracking system, and Centrac actually has clinical grade data location tracking up to like 6 feet accuracy. So that's kind of what I'm targeting, but it wouldn't necessarily have to be that.
So the facility would have to have the sensors already embedded?
It's a big lift even just to get it implemented. And so for this, it would kind of kill it if I had to implement it and in order to get the data and then to investigate, because I really want to do an analytics layer on top of their base product as a sensor. And so they implement it right now for hand washing and for duress, a button that a nurse can press and get somebody to their location quickly. So those are two of the key use cases that it's getting it implemented. And I just want to build on that with an analytics layer.
Okay, we'll put my thinking on that, because there's certainly we've heard with COVID and just again with the tracking, we've seen a lot of tracking software installed with COVID this past year because of just tracking where the nurses are and that sort of thing. So I think that there's probably more than you think, and I guess I would go to INEA, which is the American Nurses Informatics Association, and put the call out, because they would be the people who would know where those places were. Let me know. I'm on the board of the Delmarva region, but I can certainly help you make contact with some of the larger, because I think that would be a good thing, just to put a call out and say where are places that have that. I'm sure they exist.
Dana, also, I want to connect you with a man, and I just,
Paul.
that was great feedback, Susan. A person by the name of Paul Coignet. Dana, I put their LinkedIn and that. Are you familiar with this company called Inspirin?
Yes, actually,
okay.
We presented at a clinical informatics conference just a little bit ago. You're talking about Michael, right?
Yeah, co-founder. Yes. So have you guys connected?
Yes,
okay.
We have. He's a little bit different in, like he's looking at the in-room and he has, mounted devices that look in the room. I'm trying to, basically look out and around, but that's a great point. I haven't talked to him since I've started this initiative, and I really need to. Thank you.
Well, I'm turning off my video because I think my video, my internet's unstable. And the reason I think that talking to Paul makes sense. The reason being is Paul's Inspirin is in several hospitals, and theirs is a face recognition program that can actually, it actually tells you like who's in the room and who's not in the room and assists and all that kind of things. But because of the stage of the company, your way of looking at this could be a new way that their product is used for faster adoption. And if you just said that you're at a career inflection point, I know they're scaling their business. They just did a large raise. Your background, what you're talking about may exactly be the type of background that could be a good fit onto their team. So that's, I put his LinkedIn, connect with him, tell him Rebecca Love said you should get a phone call. In fact, I'm leaving this phone call to go to a connection that he asked me to have a phone call with. So he'll definitely take the call. So reach out to him, because I really think that, I know what you're saying on the hand washing stations and things like this, but I'm based on what you're talking about. I think that it's really, you need somebody who's cleared IRB for uses of this kind of way, because you're going to need an IRB clearance, which is going to be a complicated process for you to get this. And if you could work off of somebody who already is doing this space and running IRBs, this could be something very interestingly, because I think you're going to have a hard time convincing somebody like a Syntrack. I mean, it's not impossible, but you got to get Syntrack's clearance. And so anyway, I think it might we could be wrong, but let's see if something falls out there and speed track some kind of conversation for you guys there. Does that make sense? Will that work? Yeah.
Thank you, Rebecca. That's wonderful. I really appreciate it.
Well, we're coming to the end of our time, you guys. We have 4 more minutes. Is there anybody else who wants to jump in here? So you guys, I think we're going to wrap it up. Again, we're not going to do a meeting in August. Everybody go and actually take vacation and do something to relax. Starting in September, if you're not a paid member of SONSIEL, these are going to start paid events for us so that we can continue. I don't know if you guys know this, but everybody on our board is 100% volunteer. We finally just hired an assistant to help us with some things because we all work full-time jobs in external to this and do multiple other things. So this is just really a thing of our love of what we do for you guys and things like that. So next meeting on September, there's going to be new formats. As we said, we're bringing in, like what Nancy said, an expert patent attorney who really understands the details. We're going to start bringing in some really, also just rock star speakers like Hilario. Hilario, thank you for being here tonight. Everybody, thank you guys for being here in July. Go out, change the world. We got your back. Write us a blog if you want to start getting published. And everybody who did not connect, please feel free to connect via LinkedIn. And we will see you guys in September.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. Thanks for everything, Rebecca. Thanks for the opportunity, everyone.
Bye, guys. Ciao.